Korak was hungry. He was walking along this countryside road in the rain. It had been hours since he last passed a gas station. It was too late to turn back, and he didn't have any money left. "Just my luck," he sighed. Not only had he been discharged for refusing to execute unreasonable orders, he couldn't find any job in the cities due to this stain in his failed career. Fight is the only thing he knew, and the jobs who could take him didn't like his insubordination. So he found himself walking to the next city, his saved funds exhausted before he could purchase a travel pass. He rubbed his 4 scaly arms to chase the cold. His clothes were wet and his pack was starting to feel heavy. Korak looked around him at the winding road, following the rolling hills covered in harvested grain fields for what he could see in the darkness. At this point he felt miserable and a little desperate. Was he destined to die here, in the middle of nowhere? He found it ironic that the mightiest species of the galaxy was in such a pitiful state, stranded in a world he wasn't familiar with, for following his beliefs. His meaty arms didn't fit regular work, and would impede his dexterous arms otherwise. He was only a quarter of his lifespan, and he felt like he wouldn't live for long after this. His parents must feel ashamed to have a son who is so pathetic he can't help himself. Korak continued to charge through the pouring rain, occasionally wiping his brow and stout muzzle of water. As he crested the next hill, something caught his eyes. There, through the rain, he saw the faint glow of a light. He stopped to observe for a moment. When the glow didn't move, he was glad it wasn't a vehicle, as they were too small to fit him. Quickening his pace, he went on, until he was parallel to the light from the road. He was standing at the end of a dirt road to a wooden farmhouse and barn. The light was shining through the ground floor windows like a beacon he was hopeful to hang on to. Shuddering in the night, he gazed for a moment before deciding to try his chance. With his species' reputation, they most likely would turn him down. Carefully stepping on the creaking stairs of the front porch, he looked more closely at the details. The beings residing here seemed to be the average height, but the door would indicate a stance less wide than the norm. The handle appears made for dexterous hands, and the steps for smaller feet than his. Those indicate to a few species, but he will need to see them. They must not have a translator here, like half the people in the cities he passed, though. Luckily he learned a few dialects. Hopefully the residents are among those he knows. With one of his secondary hands, he gently knocked at the door. A few moments later, he heard a gruff voice in a speech he half recognized. The door opened slightly, revealing most of a middle-aged Terran staring at him suspiciously, a hand obviously holding a big object behind the door. "Well, you're a big one, ain't ya?" he said. Korak understood most of the sentence, but he cursed his luck. The Terran languages are ones he knows the less. He will have to try his best. "What are a lad like you doing out here?" he continued, still partly covered by the door. Korak tried to answer slowly, to be sure not to forget his words. "Sir, I am only traveller. I am hungry. I will work for a warm meal and place to rest." The man looked him up and down before saying, "Boy, I've no place for you." Korak's shoulders slumped at those words. Deep down he knew he would be refused, but he still grabbed at any shred of hope he has. "I understand," he said quietly. Lowering his head, he breathed out in resignation. This may be the last being he talks to in his life. He knew he won't survive the night as it is, but he wouldn't force the hand of a man who didn't do anything bad. So he prepared to leave again, but as he was going to say his thanks, the Terran interjected. "Hold a sec," he said, then closed the door. Different voices were heard through the door. Korak recognized the Terran who opened for him, but the other was unknown to him. He couldn't understand what was said due to the muffling effect of the door, but he guessed it was about him. A few seconds later, the Terran opened the door again, pointed to the floor while looking at him and said, "Wait here." Then he closed the door back. Korak was a little confused, but he wasn't going to refuse a reprieve of the rain. He unshouldered his travel pack and leaned it against the wall, then sat cross-legged on the wooden planks. He idly stroked his arms to warm himself as he stared in melancholy at the raining darkness. He was so caught in his misery that he didn't hear the front door open and the pitter-patter of light feet approaches. He was surprised when his ears suddenly picked up a new voice, one he didn't hear before, that sounded quite young and excited. "Whoa!" the little voice exclaimed in a whisper. Korak's eyes widened at the unique reaction he provoked. Carefully, he turned his head towards the door and the owner of the voice, standing just as far as their small arms reached. There, standing slightly shorter than Korak was sitting, was a Terran youngling that had the piercing eyes of their father and beautiful golden hair glittering from the house light. They had an expression of pure amazement and wonder. Korak, knowing how terrifying his form can be, was frozen in place in worry. He knew he could snap the young's neck with his brawny arms without effort, if he wasn't careful. So he moved only his head as carefully as he could. He looked into the youngling's eyes, and strangely found no trace of fear. "Are you a shark?" the youngling asked excitedly. Korak found himself unsure of what to do. He never talked with younglings before. They all stayed far away from him whenever he was around. So he tried the only thing he could think of. Trying not to show his teeth, Korak softly answered with a question of his own. "What is shark?" At those words, the youngling beamed their biggest smile and excitedly explained, See, sharks are, yes, big fish with a big tail like this." They mimed with their hands behind their back. And big fins like this." They waved their arms widely. Oh, and big teeth like yours, mister." The youngling pointed at Korak's mouth. He wasn't sure if it was a real animal or not, but his ancestors did evolve from sea-dwelling animals. If there was some like those here, he didn't know, but the youngling's passion is probably for a real creature. He was about to respond when the youngling cut in with another question. "Why do you have 4 arms? Can I touch them?" Korak was once again surprised by the eagerness the young showed, not the least bit afraid of what he was. Still, he kept in mind how dangerous he can be and did not want to hurt them. No. I am scary." The youngling tilted their head in confusion. "But you're so pretty," they argued. Korak felt conflicted. He knew it was only a matter of time before the youngling sees how scary he really is, but he longed for some kind of kinship. Luckily, he didn't have to think too much, since the Terran he'd talked to before came back to the door. "What in the... Maribel! What are you doing out here?" The little girl ran back to her father with stars in her eyes. Daddy, can I touch him?" The man quickly glanced at Korak, then back down at his daughter. "Maribel, now you know what I said about strangers, yeah?" he chastised. "But the mister looks so lonely," she protested. "Maribel, the mister was just taking cover from the rain," he countered. But, she hesitated. "Maribel?" the man repeated sternly. "Okay," the girl said with a dejected face. She looked at Korak again and said softly, "Bye-bye, mister," then stepped back inside. The Terran watched her go out of view and close back the door. At this point, Korak returned to look into the void while the man approached. Stopping beside him, he placed a plate in front of Korak. "Do you need silverware?" the man asked, designating the warm meal. Korak raised one of his slender hands. "Please," he answered. "Ah, good," the Terran said, handing him the cutlery before crossing his arms. "'Twill be less messy like this. Bon appetit," he finished, in the language Korak didn't know, but he took the silverware and ate nonetheless. It was delicious. It had been a while since he ate meat this good. Once done, he gingerly placed back the plate and cutlery in front of him. "Many thanks," he said to the Terran with a bow. The latter stroked his auburn beard with a faint smile on his lips. Well, I'll be. You weren't kidding. You're really being that hungry. It's been a while since someone enjoyed my roast beef that much, the man said with a chuckle. Apologies, Korak responded. I not eat since last city. The Terran arched an eyebrow. Since the last city? Which one? Korak pointed to where he came from. Riton? Zeron? The man uncrossed his arms in surprise. Azerton? You came all the way from there? Korak nodded. The Terran leaned back with a hearty laugh. Well, I'll be. You walked for 2 days. No wonder you were hungry, boy. Korak was not sure how to take this, so he waited. Don't worry, boy. It just show you hardy. The man turned around and opened the door. Many thanks? Korak hesitated as he saw the man enter his home. He wondered if it was time for him to go, but he saw the Terran exit as soon as he entered, with 2 long sticks made of fabric in hand. Standing again beside Korak, he presented one of the sticks to him. I trust you know how to use an umbrella? He asked. Korak wasn't sure, since he only knew the magnetic umbrellas, but he guessed they fundamentally worked the same. He nodded and took the handle with his slender hand. He examined the object for a second, then pressed the button at the end of the fabric part. What he wasn't ready for was for the fabric to spring open in his face. Surprised, he let go of the umbrella, which fell down the porch into the drenched grass. Embarrassed at this poor display, Korak hid his face behind his meaty palms while the Terran laughed. Wait here, I'll bring it back, he said between breaths, opening his own umbrella and stepping into the rain. Korak, on his part, shook his head and grabbed his pack. Standing up, he took back the umbrella the Terran handed to him again, opened it safely and joined the man on the lawn. Many thanks, he said to the Terran, who smiled at him. Come, follow me, he said, then walked towards the barn. Korak followed, but the wet ground underneath his feet was making him shiver again. You're a very polite boy, the Terran said, distracting him from his sorry state, which he was thankful for. I study. Parents raise also, he answered. The man whistled a note, then said, Is how you learned English? I try learn many languages, Korak recalled. That's good work so far. He paused as he opened the barn door. Can you fit through here? He asked. Korak felt the wave of warm air coming from inside. He closed the umbrella and leaned forward. It would be tight, but he can pass if he goes sideways. Once under the roof, the man showed him an empty stall full of straw. You can sleep there tonight. Since your clothes are wet, you should hang them to dry, he asked, pointing at horizontal poles and beams. He then looked down at Korak's feet. I suppose with claws like that you can't wear shoes, right? Korak nodded but didn't add anything. Well, there won't be a problem then, the Terran continued. If you get too cold still... He walked to another stall to pat an equine. This is Harold? Then waved at a cow in the nearby stall, lazily munching silage. And that there's Gary. They'll keep you warm. Korak was eternally grateful for this kindness, but could only respond with, Many thanks. The Terran waved him off with a clap on his brawny shoulder. Bah, enough of that. You said you will work for it, so if you're still here tomorrow when I come, you'll work. Korak felt uneasy now, since he obviously couldn't work as a labourer. Apologies, sir, I only know fight. I know not how to help. The man looked at him for a moment with an unreadable look before smiling back again. Well, boy, that's not a problem. These big arms of yours surely can load a ton. You'll learn in no time. The name's Albert, he said, pointing a thumb to his chest, then waved at Korak. What do you call you? Name, yes, Korak whispered. Introductions always should be given. My name is Korak, he said carefully, trying to announce all the words correctly. Albert offered a hand with his warm smile. Korak knew of this practice since he studied the most common customs of many species. So, with one of his slender hands, he grasped the man's own, and a firm handshake was given. "Nice to meet you," the man said, releasing his hold. "Now, I'm a-gonna let you rest, and I'll see you tomorrow." He waved, then went back out into the rain. Korak, now alone with his thoughts, wondered how long this would last. Probably only for the morning. He was not a skilled worker, after all. He wasn't raised to tend to the fields or beasts. Few of his kin were. He doubted Albert will keep him after he knows his story, but at least he will not die today. Korak hung his wet vestments to dry and lay down in the straw. He had doubts, but he found himself to be glad for once. Maybe he will try his best here. With those thoughts, he closed his eyes to rest. And, for once in a long while, Korak had a peaceful sleep with beautiful dreams.